go ahead and call this meeting of the Fredericksburg Area Metropolitan Planning Organization to order. First up is Pledge of Allegiance. Everyone, please stand if you are able. Pledge allegiance to the flag and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, everyone. Ms. Giselle, would you please call the roll?
Yes. From Spotsylvania County, we have Mr. Tim McLaughlin, Mr. Chris Yakubowski, Mr. David Ross.
Here.
Mr. Kevin Marshall, Ms. Deborah Frazier, Ms. Lori Hayes.
Here.
From the city of Fredericksburg, Mr. Jason Graham.
Here.
Mr. Matthew Kelly, Mr. Tim Berruti.
Here.
Mr. David Brown. From Stafford County, we have Ms. Meg Bomsky,
Here.
Ms. Monica Gary, Ms. Crystal Vanuch,
Here.
Ms. Pamela Young, Mr. Darrell English. From the representative from the Secretary of Transportation, Ms. Marcy Parker, Ms. Michelle Stockfire. Here. And from the Potomac and Rappahannock Transportation Commission, Dr. Bob Schneider, Mr. Joe Stainsby.
I didn't get them.
I don't think we were gonna have.
Did I get them?
I don't think we have. I didn't.
And we have quorum present.
That's crazy to think that this.
Thank you very much.
I know.
Just have a forum.
Right.
Because we don't, it's one vote.
Choke it out.
And there's 5 of you.
So nobody can leave the
And we have
room.
all 3 council.
Well, there's 6
Yeah.
now because David's here.
Oh, I beg your pardon.
Yes, we're actually 2. No, it's one over, yes.
If one person leaves, you can carry on. If
Tim,
2 people
if
leave,
Tim wasn't here, we'd be in
all
trouble.
of us.
So Tim, if you leave, we can all.
Actually.
Well, no, you're here.
Okay.
Yeah, that's right. You're here.
Yeah, we have 2 from each locality. Yep.
Oh, darn.
All right.
Sorry about that. Yeah.
Next on the agenda is the approval of the April 18th Policy Committee agenda. Do I have a motion?
So moved. Bossy, you want to second that?
Second.
There is a motion and a second. Any discussion?
I do have a discussion item that we were discussing beforehand. We have the bylaws on the agenda again to discuss.
So, the chair, had brought that up as a point of personal privilege, and he had, I assumed he was going to have some remarks to make on it. He did not send those to me. I will be passing over that item on the agenda this evening.
Okay.
Okay, all right, thank you for the explanation.
Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Chair votes aye, motion carries. We are now, public involvement. Comments and questions from members of the public are welcome at this time. Staff will also read comments submitted by the public prior to the meeting. Is there anyone here from the public who wishes to speak?
I'm Rupert Farley. It's been a while since I've been here. I'm a member of CTAG. For a long time I have been. That's what brings me here. I feel like I need to do a little damage control tonight. Our chairman will be telling you at some point that he's been authorized to speak on our behalf about congestion on Interstate 95. And he didn't get unanimous approval on this. And I wanted all of you to know that I'm amongst the 30% that voted against letting him speak to this issue to you. Mainly because the solutions that he's shown us have been impractical and short-sighted, and hate for you to spend your time on them. Some people might say that maybe he doesn't even believe in these issues himself, and he's just grandstanding. Do a little political grandstanding and get his name out there and maybe run for office at some point. But regardless of whether it's grandstanding or whether he believes that we can pave our way out of congestion, I just wanted to make sure that you knew that some of us did not approve of his coming here. What would be nice, and I tried to suggest that we take this approach, was that we do something that's sustainable and affordable instead of what we've been doing for the last 70 years, trying to pave our way to congestion. What I'm talking about is reducing the demand for the roads instead of keep increasing the supply of asphalt. A couple of ways this can be done is by, like, increasing the sales tax, gasoline by 100% or 200 or 300, whatever it takes to get people off the road. That's not advisable, I don't think, because it doesn't really target the congestion. It gets everybody off all the roads. You really want people off the roads that are congested. So congestion pricing is a better alternative. Unfortunately, state laws don't allow us to apply that to roads. So this is what a couple of years ago, before the pandemic started, I might have even mentioned it to this group. And this is what I would like to see the approach that you take, is have a legislative committee going to Richmond and Washington or wherever it takes to get the rules changed so that we can start using congestion pricing. And the tolls that we collect from congestion pricing can pay for the transit we'll need to take because the roads are congested. Well, they won't be congested at that point, but they'll be unaffordable. Anyhow, you get my drift. I would like you to consider whatever it takes, legislative committees. Perhaps first you feel like you need to educate the public as to the fact that they do have two alternatives. You don't have to put down more asphalt, you can just get rid of more cars. So if educating the public is what's in order, they're the leaders, I don't know much about that stuff. We've actually, on one of our committees at CTAG, had the suggestion made that...
Excuse me, Mr. Farley. It's 3 minutes.
All right, I have 3 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Farley. Anyone else from the public wish to speak at this time? All right, do we have anyone online? All right, thank you. Do we have any comments submitted to staff? No.
Nothing this one?
All right, thank you very much. At this time, moving on to the consent agenda.
Motion for approval of the minutes from the March meeting.
There's a motion from Stafford.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Ross. Motion and a second. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Chair votes aye, motion carries.
Abstaining. And I'm abstaining
Oh, thank you.
also.
All right, so, all right, thank you. 3 ayes, 4 ayes, is that Mr. Broody? And 2 abstains. All right, thank you. Any,
There.
I was there, never mind.
all right.
You can abstain.
I can't remember where I've been.
Michelle? Okay.
I said it online.
Okay. All right, at this time, we're going to move on to the administrator report.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We can pull up some slides. I won't keep you long tonight. My April report, next slide. Look at congestion, the freight summit, and this stands for, guess what? They call the infrastructure bill by many different names now, and it seems that we've not settled on the name of this damn thing, so it's the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, BIL, or IIJA.
It's actually the BIF, the Bipartisan Infrastructure Fund, BIF.
That's been called that as well.
Yeah.
Stephen wants IIJA.
You'd like that, wouldn't you?
Whatever you want to call it, that's what we're talking about. But I report on traffic every now and again, congestion, and on what the impact of COVID was. You remember, you've seen this graph before up to about there, so that was the big start of COVID. Can you take a guess what this big drop was here in the data in January?
Storm.
That was the big snowstorm that shut down I-95.
It really should be the other way.
That affected the traffic.
Have a storm all.
Press the next slide.
If they were there, they just couldn't.
This is the thing I want you to focus on. See the freight traffic, the red line? That's freight, trucks. See how much it's grown since COVID started? The gray line is the point at which traffic was before COVID, right? That's the zero line. That's how much freight has grown since COVID started. Cars, which is the orange line, is up and down, but it's kind of approaching pre-COVID levels. depending on, you know, the weather and all these other things. And the total is the blue line over there, but that's the part that massively increased since before COVID. That's OIP's VDOT figures across the state of Virginia, but we've taken out, extracted only the Fredericksburg district figures of traffic to tell you what's going on with the traffic. Next slide. Transit. So you remember, I've done graphs like this before. This is actually Fred Transit's own slide. I've stolen their slide, and they showed this to us at their last meeting. You can see here, orange was 2019, yellow was 2020, green was 2021, and the red is the 2022 figures, annualized. And so you can see we're in March now. Do you see how much the Fred ridership has gone up? And of course, what changed in February to lead to that was the fare-free service. So that figure tells you the difference that fare-free has made on the ridership. It's actually gone up significantly. Unfortunately, I was really hoping that we were going to see a big increase when the hour early service started on Fred Transit, but I can't find it in the figures. So maybe Fred can tell me about that at some point, but that didn't make a great change to the figures. What's made the big change is the fare-free service. So you live and learn, right, from the data. That's what the data tells us. Next slide. I was going to add in there the VRE numbers, but we got the expert tonight. He's going to make a presentation on the agenda and tell you about them himself, so I won't upstage him. I've left the VRE numbers off of there. The Freight Summit, why do we want to do one? Just to give you some insight. We have, between our region and DC, the worst freight delay times in the state of Virginia. But that's a fact. OIP has told us this. Their data indicate that. So we want to dig into this problem. VTrans, Virginia's long-range transportation planning, we think perhaps needs some updating to include some slightly different freight metrics. We're measuring the freight, but the VTrans needs don't capture freight problems in perhaps the way they could. So we want to debate that a little bit. Local knowledge on freight congestion is needed. We found out that Beulah-Salisbury Street, for example, the trucks, when they turn, they smash into the sidewalk and the poles on the side of the road. They're localized, street-specific problems with freight in our region. We need to find out where they are so we can help solve them, right? Local intersections that have logistics limitations, better understanding of local rail freight opportunities. We don't know as FAMPO staff, and I don't know if you do, but what are the limitations of switching your freight to rail? There's some limits. You can't just everybody move to rail, but what are those limitations, and are there ways we can assist? And then environmental issues. The city's already mentioned to us at this forum that there's certain chemicals being stored in containers on the train line, and we want to just understand what other environmental issues there might be. Next slide. The details, we're pegging the summit for September 2022, that's this year. We've put it in the UPWP, which you'll see later in the program. I'm keeping the budget as small as possible. This is not a big spend item, but we did ask for a little bit of money to put on the summit so that we can do that. Where are the difficult intersections? What's causing the delay times? What difficulties are experienced with freight rail? What are the environmental issues? Why are we having these worst congestion problems in the state? We want to try and understand a little bit more about how freight is involved with those issues in our region, so we want to put on the summit. Next slide. So that we've spoken to the Fredericksburg Regional Alliance, and they prepared to partner with us in helping us find companies that move a lot of freight, invite them to the summit. We have spoken to OIP. OIP, I don't know if I've told VDOT this, but OIP has said they're prepared to come and attend the summit, and to attenders prepared to speak if we want them, so they're very happy to participate. We're going to invite VDOT. Surprise, surprise. We'd like you to attend. And then the counties and the city's economic development departments, if we'd like to ask you to send one person so that we're connecting economic development with transportation by looking at freight in our region. So we'd like you to send one person. We invite you to Virginia and freight and logistics companies who are the primary target. We want to listen to logistics companies, freight companies, people who do trucking, people who move lots of freight, and find out what issues they experience so that as we build our own plans in the future, our long-range transportation plan, which will eventually get reviewed again, and some of our location-specific plans, we can build solutions to freight problems into those. The goal is to produce a report on what the freight needs and the freight problems are in our region, and so that we have that in a one-stop report, which will be produced at the end of the summer. Next slide. The mega funding and infrastructure bill funding. Federal highways have released these calls for applications for funding opportunities. Two of these are old. They're rolled over of previous programs. One of them is new. So the mega program has $1 billion in 22. Infra program has about 1.5 billion. And the rural large project funding stream has about 300 million in FY22 funding. And these are coming up for application, closing date on the 23rd of May this year. Not necessarily something that FAMPO can do a lot about right now because these are very large projects. However, some of the things we are looking at in the future are very large projects. If we want to put 2 extra lanes on the highway between exit 130 and 126, it's a $175 million project. It's not going to get funded through CMAQ, right? We're going to need big money. These are the kinds of places you get big money. When you want to put a new access to Central Park on the highway, you need that kind of big money. When Harrison Road, Spotsylvania wants to put another big access place, that's the kind of money you need. This is where you get those size contributions. What are they? Mega fund projects between $100 million and $500 million. Infra, also large projects, they have to be at least costing $25 million to even be considered for this application. And the grant would be at least $5 million. And the rural, 90% of the rural grant amounts must be at least $25 million. So these are the size of these projects. And these grants will be available, I think it's on an annual basis, but this year's deadline is coming. Next year we might want to think ahead of time and say, well, what big projects in the future are we going to need big funding for? And can we prepare a project so that we have everything ready to go when the next opportunity comes to apply for these, which is why I'm raising this with you. I've given much more detail in the text. This is just a quick summary. Next slide. What are the eligible kinds of projects? A highway or bridge project on the national freight network. A highway or bridge project on the national highway system that is not necessarily got to do with freight. Freight intermodal project. A railway highway grade separation project. An intercity passenger rail project. Similar also for the infra grant, it includes ports and access and that kind of thing, intermodal projects, grade crossings, a wildlife crossing, a surface transportation project within the boundaries or functionally connected to an international border. There's all kinds of things. The rural project, again, a highway, a bridge, or a tunnel eligible under the national highway system. So bridges and tunnels and all kinds of big infrastructure projects like that are eligible to receive this kind of funding. Freight is a big metric that they look at when they consider these big projects. So that ties in with our interest in freight. Next slide.
Actually, sorry, Ian, if you wouldn't mind just going back on the eligible projects. I mean, in that case, would say the third rail, if we think to increase the freight possibilities, would that fall under?
Well, it talks about the freight rail projects that provide public benefit.
Okay.
So
all right.
There is a freight rail and there's also a passenger rail element. So yes, those would qualify. Also, lanes on the I-95, access interchanges on the I-95. Maybe that tunnel that we're talking about, maybe one day building for the bike and peds under the I-95. I know nobody wants to fund that, but this might be a place we could one day get funding for something like that. Next slide. they fund up to 60% of total eligible project costs, but you can use other federal assistance to get it up to 80% of the project costs. And then, there's another little secret. If there's a rural element, you can add the rural program benefit to take it up to 100% of project cost. So depending on how you put a big project like that together, you can get 60%, 80%, or 100% of the project cost funded by these federal grants. This is big stuff. So when we want a big thing, we're not going to get it out of CMAQ. We're going to have to look at some of these other opportunities. There are the links for you. These slides will go up on the internet, on the Facebook, on the FAMPO website, so you can have a look at, if you want to get more information, the links and so on are there. I just want to make us aware of these, because we can't fund everything we want out of our annual CMAQ and SDGB allocations. We sometimes have to get these bigger grants. Next slide. The vision, I'm working on a committee survey, and this will be rolled out to you before the next policy committee meeting. It will also go to the TAC and so on. I'll be talking about that. We're working on that survey. Next slide. The CMP, we've told you about this a number of times, but the latest data has been downloaded and is available on the website. The VCR trail study has now commenced after we had a month's delay getting some approvals in place. It's now underway, and we're starting with a site visit. We're going to go and have a look at where the trail ends at the I-95 and see what the problems are. They're going to do a site inspection and starting that project now to analyze that, plus the two bridges in the city of Fredericksburg. And we are now busy with draft allocations for CMAQ and SCBG, which you'll hear about later. But we've been told, thankfully, by VDOT that there's a little bit of extra money available. So we're going to make proposals for allocating that additional money. So that's my presentation for this month. Thank you very much.
Mr. Chair, so one group that I think, if you haven't already thought about incorporating them, that they should be included into the September summit is, and it triggered my thought when you made a comment about the chemicals, is our hazard mitigation group. Are you familiar with them?
I'm not familiar with the group, but I certainly will reach out to them.
Yes, so we have a committee in this region for hazard mitigation as it relates to fires and anything like that that would happen on our freight areas. I mean, Tim, you might be able to elaborate a little bit more.
Are they a regional group or a
No, it's a group from, you know, firefighters from each of the various jurisdictions, and I don't, what is the name of it? Can anybody help me here? Anyway, they should be, they need to be a player at the table as it relates to, because there are a lot of chemicals, as you know, coming in and out of this area. My other question is about, I know that, and the King George people obviously aren't here, so they're not on FAMPO, and they're typically sit in when we have the double meetings in January and February. But one of my questions would be, how many freight cars are still bringing the New York trash down to the King George landfill?
I don't know how many. What I do know is that that freight line is still operational, and they still take trains in and out of there every month, but not many. So I know there are trains going in and out of there, freight trains. I can't give you numbers exactly.
So you're saying not many. Okay, I'd like to see the data on that.
Not many individual trains, but I don't know how many individual cars per train. There may be very long trains.
I think that would be interesting data for FAMPO to look at. The other comment I would like to make is, as it relates to freight, a major area where we have congestion is on Butler Road, Sunday evenings. As you guys all know, people coming back from their river homes, or people coming up from Virginia Beach and the whole back road that they take. And that is an area where we need to consider maybe one of these larger bridges. I mean, Bill Howe did a great job getting the Falmouth intersection improved, but it won't last for the next 25 years. We have to make other additional improvements.
I hear you. I stand corrected, but I think it's one of the roads we listed of the 13 roads that we're studying in the east-west study. I can't tell you off the top of my head exactly,
yes, it
but
is.
I think it is.
It is.
So it will be analyzed by VHB, the consultants, who are going to look at the model and all of those roads that we've listed there, and to look at where on those roads the choke points are, where the problem areas are. So I think that's already, and we've already funded that study, so I think
Yeah.
that's already in the pipeline.
That is correct, but I just wanted to bring it up as a public comment.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Anybody else? Mr. Chair, I think I'm done.
All right, thank you, Mr. Ellis.
Yes, one thing I did want to mention about the earlier times for service, that's not going to have direct impact on ridership because people don't immediately change jobs because you started running service now. So they're not going to change doctor's appointments, reschedule life, et cetera.
Yeah.
So you're just not going to see that. You're going to see it over time.
Yeah.
Because that's when they're able to then make different decisions. And really what you're doing is they're shifting their behavior, but then you're attracting new riders. Now will seek new opportunities, and they don't happen overnight. It's going to take some time for that to build in. We see that every time we run services, but the number one thing you can do to attract new riders, you're doing, which is zero fare. Like it or not, fare's a barrier. People don't have, whether you can afford it or not, anyone here got $1? You know, I mean, I got 2 of them, that's it. So if we all want to go, we're in trouble. But those are the kinds of things that you can do that eliminates barriers. Plus, what you tend to do is just shuffle the money between social service agencies. Serve the customer, let them ride. So those are just some of the key things that, you know, that will occur as a byproduct of that. So it's in there somewhere.
Yeah.
So.
All right, thank you.
Carl.
All right. Moving on, item 8A, VRE ridership trends before and during COVID. Mr. Ruiz.
Yes, thank you. Thanks for having me this evening. I won't be too long. For some of you, this is a repeat, but it's not quite a repeat, so pay attention because there's a few things in different places, and feel free to stop me. You know, I'm not going to run through this monolithically. If you have some good questions, because you always do, just stop me. But I'm going to present to you tonight on some of the VRE ridership trends that we've seen pre-COVID, and then, you know, I didn't want to say post-COVID because we're still in it, but I would say during COVID. We can go ahead and go to the next slide. One of the things that we have to do when we're looking at who's riding, where they're riding, and when is to define our riders' catchment areas. And from a previous study that we did back in 2018, it was the transit development plan that we performed for VRE. We found that the majority of FAMPO district riders were coming from these zones and accessing these stations to go into the core in the morning and then coming back in the evening. We did some analysis on these catchment areas and found that, you know, the trends still hold. Even during COVID, this is generally where we are still attracting our customer base, and that's simply because that's where the residential densities are in the region. Go on to the next slide. So to give you all a comparison, and I'll stay on this slide as long as you need because it can be a little challenging to understand, but basically the first half of the slide shows the major passenger flows inbound and outbound in 2019. So before COVID was even an issue, about 6% of all of the traffic on the Fredericksburg line was going between Fredericksburg and LaFont. Brook, Quantico also put up some big numbers. And so pre-COVID, we were seeing roughly 40% of our customers terminating their trips at LaFont and about 24% at Union Station. This is where all the federal workforce is clustered. It's a pretty evergreen employment center, and it's very easy because once you get off the train, you just walk about 5 or 10 minutes and you're at your office. Fast forward to 2020, I would say this is kind of our baseline ridership because this was at the very bottom, absolute worst months of the pandemic when the fewest customers were riding. And we had some interesting trends kind of come bubble to the surface. 8% of the line ridership was only going between Spotsylvania and Quantico. Another 10% were going between Quantico and Union Station, and another 12% between Lorton and Union Station. And it doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out what is concentrated at Lorton and Quantico. It's DOD and military installations. So we were seeing a decent amount of customers who were still on the line, you know, during COVID. They were using VRE to bypass, because most of the congestion in the region on 95 happens right around here. So it was a pretty useful alternative for those who still need to be on the train. Right to the next slide. And we also took a look at, you know, what riders were doing demographically before COVID and also during COVID. And really, we found that there was very little, if no change in the rider demographics. And, you know, that kind of made sense because we didn't change our fares. We didn't change the times the trains were running. We didn't really change anything about the service. So we expected that the customers that were still riding, you know, are gonna ride before and after. They're just riding in much smaller numbers. So this is just a chart showing, you know, when customers are riding, they're riding at the same times as before. Next slide. From a racial demographic perspective, racial demographics almost didn't change at all. Same spread across the board. And also income demographics. Now, VRE is one of the systems in commuter rail systems in the country that enjoys a relatively high percentage of high-income riders, and that's just because of the economics of the region and the job market. It's a very good job market in DC, a lot of high-paying jobs, and a lot of people who have the time and the money to commute. So that really didn't change. We can go on to the next slide. Now, this is a really interesting graph because what it shows us is a breakdown by year, 2019, 2020, and 2021 for both weekday and weekend. And this is not VRE. This is automobile trips. So this is showing the average daily automobile trips from all of the Fredericksburg line catchment stations to one of our four station catchment areas. So this isn't people going to Carl's Jr. or going to the mall. This is people who are literally leaving from the Brook catchment area or the Leland catchment area and going into the core. And what you see is a rather predictable drop in the AM peak in 2020 and a little bit of a building back in 2021. Now, we just don't have the 2022 numbers yet. We get this from Streetlight, which uses cell phone data to get information. But what's really interesting about the trends that we're starting to see on the roadways, and this is not a surprise to anyone around here, is that our 2021 AM inbound, morning traffic is less, there's less volume than our weekend PM inbound. So there are more people going into DC, going into those core areas between 10 and 3 p.m. and 3 p.m. and 8 p.m. on the weekends than between 5 and 10 on the weekdays.
Right.
And the little VRE icons show the time periods that VRE, we serve these markets, these three markets. We do not serve any of these markets here. We don't run weekend service. So as internally as staff and our consultants that are assisting us are looking at ways that we can grow the service, respond and rebound from the pandemic, but also grow our customer base. We're really interested in these bars right here because that gives you a relative sense of how many people, and these are people that are literally going to destinations around LaFont Station, destinations around Union Station, now it's Andrea. So, did anyone have any questions on this one before I move on? Yes.
So Nick, as you know, there's been some conversation at VRE meetings from board members about, and I was one of them, about why do we not look at running weekend service, but then we didn't have any data. Mm-hmm. And, some people were saying it's going to cost us money to run that service. But with these numbers that I'm sure, are you making this presentation Friday at the VRE meeting?
No, I'm not.
Okay. Maybe that's not the case. Maybe it wouldn't be a money loser.
Well, I can't speak to the financial situation of those potential trains. We just don't have that level of analysis right now. But what I will say is that the weekend service and our ability to run weekend service is governed by the agreements that we have with the state. And
Right.
so the earliest that we would contractually be allowed to operate weekend service is 2026. And that's all part of the Transforming Rail Virginia deal that was negotiated a couple of years ago between CSX and VRE.
However, what's clear from these numbers is that you have customers.
Well, and that's, the question is, do you? Because what volume of this is through traffic? And because I can go park my car in an unmetered spot, a metered spot on Saturday at 3 p.m. outside Union Station or LaFont.
Yeah, and just to be clear, this is traffic between the catchment areas and those station areas.
Right.
So
volume of traffic.
Yeah.
Nationwide.
So it's not the people going up to Baltimore or somewhere else in the region. This is literally like the maximum quote-unquote potential market that we could serve. if we did something like that. So, but you're absolutely right. Some of the market forces that dissuade people from taking the train up to DC, it's parking's cheap. You got 5 kids in the car or a group of friends. There's a disincentive when you all have to pay. So, we can go to the next slide. Same thing. This is just going southbound. So you can see obviously the peaks were in the evening, and we're still seeing 2021 outbound weekday kind of similar or just a little bit higher than the weekend outbound. Slide.
Sorry, do you have the reverse? Because I'm thinking, okay, if you're talking about weekend service, okay, go up, but you got to come back. And I'm wondering if you had from Core to Fredericksburg, but do you have that for later in the evening? Is that blue bar at the very very end? Can you tell me that time?
8 p.m. to 12 a.m.
Okay, that was what I was curious about, and it's okay.
In 2021, it was just a little shy of 20,000. So there's 20,000 automobile trips that are traveling from the core to the Fredericksburg area.
Okay. Well, yeah, that's interesting.
But the question is, on the previous slide, you showed trips into DC on the weekend.
From DC back.
And
Yeah.
this is from DC.
Well, but it says from Fredericksburg to Core. Oh, there it is.
Oh, sorry, she's switching the thing on.
Okay. From Core to Fredericksburg, it's like, I think there's somewhere, okay.
So does the next slide show early times in the day on the weekend?
So if you go back to the slide, this is from,
So this is from Fredericksburg to
What about to Fredericksburg on a Saturday morning?
from DC on a Saturday.
Right.
Go to the next one. That would
the morning?
That would be till like the 5 a.m. to 10 a.m. right here. So I would say a little less than 10.
The gray one would be a successful service. What time of the day is that? I can't see it.
10 a.m. to 3 p.m.
10 a.m. to 3 p.m.
10 a.m. to 3 p.m., 3 p.m. to 8 p.m.
A lot of people leaving DC to come to this area.
DC is not a morning town. Not on the weekends.
Yeah. Well, and it also, the primary reason why people travel is for work. And what we saw, I didn't want to clutter this slide up, but the majority of trips on the weekday are work trips. The majority of trips on the weekend are not work trips. So, it's a different thing. But we'll go ahead and move on to the next one. So back before the pandemic, just want to point this out. I mean, this might be apparent to most people, but our riders are an early crowd because that's when the trains are running. They want to get on the train between 4 and 6 a.m., get up to DC, do their work, and get back. And so these are the 4 stations in the region. Obviously, Leland was the highest ridership station before COVID, but most of the stations see a spike kind of in their 5 to 6 a.m. window. So from a regional planning, roadway planning perspective, and certainly for your east-west study, thinking about the volumes of traffic that are to be expected on the roads around the stations, if we continue this pattern of service, this is when the majority of those customers are going, and it works for them generally because that's generally not a time when other people are on the road doing other things. So there's typically a pretty low level of traffic. So, go on to the next slide. And then this is really cool because this shows back in 2019 kind of where our riders were coming from, and this validates those catchment area maps that I showed you before. We have some that are coming as far as Lake Anna, but typically it's west of the railroad tracks and certainly a lot west of 95. So again, another topic, in the east-west study is understanding how many people are doing this in the morning and what opportunities we might have to serve those customers in the future. And the same story is the case, you can go to the next slide, with Fredericksburg, Leland. And Leland's kind of an interesting one because of the time it takes to drive to Leland, we see a lot of our customers actually originating from the same space. Even though it's distance-wise, it's shorter to Spotsy, they're driving to Leland. And, we can do a whole nother presentation on why that's the case. But Leland has a much bigger catchment area than all. Same with Brook. Brooke, you know, you've got this kind of, help me out with the road, is it 610 or
6:30.
630, yeah. That corridor, most of the customers are coming from that area and stuff.
And it's not as easy to get to as Leland and Spotsy.
A lot of two-lane roads, a lot of windy roads.
Yeah, so, Mr. Chair, so that's interesting, that we are still in the catchment area around Leland, that we're still getting a lot of people from Spotsylvania. We remember it was clearly the case before Spotsylvania's facility was built, you know, and remember all the overflow, we didn't have enough parking for everybody, but,
I mean, we have, if you're on Route 3 in Spotsy, the city's kind of hard to get to, plus you have to walk quite a distance.
right.
It makes sense to go to Stafford, to Leland. To me, that's where
Yeah, no, I understand. I guess I wouldn't have thought it would have been that populated.
and we definitely don't want to drive down to the Spotsy train station or
Right.
going the other way.
Mhm.
Yeah. Go on to the next one. And just, so that everyone's aware,
There's the new information.
yes, there's the new information that Ian so, quickly passed me for, but it's happening. I mean, we are seeing a pretty significant, increase in our ridership over these last couple of months. But this just gives you a sense, we're the red, in case you didn't know, just how severe of a decline in ridership, we kind of experienced and how shallow of a return that really was. And so right around here, a lot more agencies started to publicly say, this is what we're doing, we're coming back 3 days a week, 2 days a week, private businesses as well. And so you're starting to see this upward trajectory. But I present this slide because I want everyone to understand that ridership is just simply a factor of the service operated. You know, if you're operating 8 trains a day, at a time when the people who used to ride those trains don't need to ride them anymore, you're not going to have very high ridership. Compare that to a system like Tri-Rail, which is down in South Florida. They run in both directions all day. They serve like 3 major cities, 2 airports, and their rebound was much more steady and significant over the last 2 years. So.
One of the things that would change about the VRE system when you offer bi-directional service and when you offer weekend trains, the whole graph will change because suddenly there are options, whereas now you can only go north on weekdays. The minute you have north and south and on weekends, suddenly that whole graph will completely change because it'll be a completely different service.
Yeah.
Also, another question, the cross-platform agreements, with Amtrak, those are still off the table.
Those are still not operational right now. So the VPRA, the Passenger Rail Authority, would be one of the big, I guess, parties that would need to have conversations with Amtrak to bring those back. And that's kind of, I'm on the planning side, and that's kind of on the operations side of the house. So
Okay.
I can't really speak to like when those might come back or not, but I know that there have been some discussions about like when it's appropriate to bring those back and for which trains, because it might not be the same trains as it was.
Yeah, and I also wonder if that would be a way to ease into weekend service as well.
Yeah, I think that there's opportunities there, and there's one slide, I can't remember if it's the next one, yes, this is the one.
Okay.
Where I'm gonna just talk a little bit about that. I mean, essentially this is all a plug for the system plan that we're, starting to update now. It's a once in a decade, process, and the last one was updated in 2014, and 2015. And so VRE is really taking a fresh look at this system plan, looking at, what has changed since pre-COVID, the different ridership patterns and things, and really looking at developing scenarios based on some of these assumptions and projecting ridership. And so we will have, hopefully by the end of the calendar year, to present to the VRE board, some likely scenarios, that will project us out to the 2030 and the 2050 time. And this is going to be really important because this will help us to identify some of the potential complementary transit partnerships, complementary and connecting transit partnerships that we could use to maybe bolster service in areas where maybe it's too expensive from an operations standpoint to add another train, but hey, bus might be a good complementary option because that's maybe the level of demand that we see for that particular time or something. And then obviously number 4, working with the Passenger Rail Authority to look at the cross-honor ticketing agreements and look at, which trains make the most sense. Are they weekend trains? Are they weekday trains? Are they both? And then also looking at, fare policy enhancements, because as you mentioned, getting people to ride the train on the weekend is a whole different market. And they will respond to a whole different set of, microeconomic stimuli than, the ones who are receiving the federal transit benefits go to work. So, that's it. So if anyone has any other questions, happy to take them, but.
What are the federal transit benefits these days? So you give vouchers out to DOD, Marines still?
So I want to say it's like $280 a month.
$280 right now.
Yeah, $280 a month, yeah. So that covers a pretty significant portion of a monthly pass for,
I think that's,
yeah.
years ago, it was 110.
Yeah. So it really is a reason why
10 years ago.
60 to 70% of our ridership is federal government.
Do you guys still have a mask mandate?
We do, yeah, we follow.
Not
the
today.
CDC.
So per law,
Yeah.
there's a judge who made a ruling that is.
Did they?
It's correct. They voided it, however, there is a term for appeal.
Interesting.
So then it will go through that process, but we are under the TSA, so what
Okay.
it says is what goes.
Okay, so there must have been someone from the Justice Department on my train because they weren't wearing a mask, and I was like, interesting. But, yeah, that's good to know.
The other interesting thing, though, is that big uptick in ridership came after the president made that announcement on television, hey, all federal workers should start coming back to the office. Subsequent to that, the ridership climbed like that.
Yeah.
Until then, it was slowly going up.
Mm-hmm.
Then that announcement, for whatever it's worth, whatever you think of that,
Okay.
but from that announcement, we suddenly saw the ridership go up.
And you can track the ridership based on the rise and fall of the variant. So if another one comes back, the ridership will plummet, period. So, I mean, that's just what happens.
Fred is more robust than VRE in terms of the effects of COVID.
And that's actually really unfortunate, because when you look at Rich Dalton and what they mandated of their workers, keeping those trains clean and maybe free of all kinds of bacteria, their efforts were tremendous.
Yeah, transit has done an outstanding job responding.
Yes.
But when people are sick, they don't travel.
Yeah.
Or when they think they're gonna get sick.
Okay.
All right, that's it.
Yes.
All right, great. All right, thank you, Mr. Ruiz.
Thanks.
All right, moving on to item 8B, I-95 outer connector history and process. Ms. Shropshire and Mr. Haynes.
While that's setting up, if I can just give it a context, you'll remember last meeting we had some input from the chairman of CTAC about the LRTP and about the need for an outer connector. And there was some discussion, and the policy committee asked me to get folks in, or do it myself, who can best give us a short presentation on what is required to develop a mega project. Subsequently, I got a couple of phone calls from policy committee members who said, can you also just give us a very brief history of what happened on this in the past, because we had a number of new policy committee members join the policy, or people who haven't been on the policy committee for a while. So Stephen's going to do that first part for us. Thank you, Stephen, is really the expert on the history. And then Michelle Shropshire from VDOT is going to talk to us about what are the big steps you have to have if you want to run a big project. So thanks, Steve.
Thanks. Good evening, everyone. The information I'm going to show you, this timeline, is available in much more detail in your packet if you want to look at, more dates than we have here. And the reason I'm here, as Ian pointed out, my expertise is based on the fact that I'm as old as I am for 35 years. So I lived through all of this, so I have some recollection of it. If you could go to the next slide, please. I'm going to just kind of go through the next one. I think this one. A 10-year period starting in 1993. In 1993, the last interchange in the FAMPO area on 995 was approved. It was, of course, between exit 133 and 140. There was a 7-mile gap there, and the Centerport interchange was approved right near Mountain View Road to serve that Centerport area. The new airport was under development at that time, and so the interchange gave us lots of opportunities. It was virgin land. There's nothing there, right? First thought to some people's mind was, what about, this is a good place to start a bypass. While the interchange was still in development, the discussion began. And you'll see that this points out that a northwest bypass, beginning at the new interchange, would start there. The reason why northwest, that's the axis 95 this way, the Rappahannock this way, Fredericksburg in the center, right? So the northwest quadrant. But that was the only one that was considered. All along, there were discussions about an eastern bypass, a western bypass. So the northwest one was chosen for obvious reasons. That would immediately serve 17 and Route 3. It would take traffic off of both of those, redistribute it to the north before it had to go to exits 130 and 133 and bring the greatest relief. So that made the most sense. But there was the discussion at various times, before and after, about a potentially circumferential roadway all the way around, Fredericksburg Beltway, as you call it. But you kind of get an idea of what we went through here. We had a number of citizens' meetings, corridors were added, we worked in a draft environmental impact statement. The Commonwealth Transportation Board made a selection of corridor 1, and just a minute, I'm going to show you the map, it shows all the corridors. Further action was done with EIS. We found out that there were battlefields in Spotsylvania in particular that were needed to be avoided. There was a lot of objection to the location of some of the corridors, so four additional corridors were added at that time. More meetings. The Transportation Board came back again, chose corridor 1B,
10 years.
and the final EIS was published. And if we go to the next slide, you'll see this mighty octopus that was drawn. But let me point out a few things about it. First of all, before you look over here, this is where it ended, of course. 10 years after it started, 2 of the 3 jurisdictions decided to oppose it.
Damn you, Spotsy.
We're making no judgment.
And we're walking.
But you can see what some of the ideas were. Here's the new interchange.
Were you watching what was in, Dave?
And, you know, the one that was chosen was 1, and then the portion called 1B. And the reason it goes as far west as it does is there was a Rocky Bend Reservoir, which didn't exist at that time. It was planned in this area. So everything kind of went out there, Holly what?
Holly Corner.
Yeah, Holly Corner.
What?
Yeah, that's right there.
That's why he wants it so bad.
We're there.
Okay. That's where the main corridor went, and then when it got to the river, originally it went out here closer to the battlefield, and then these additional ones were pulled in. But we have other corridors here. You know, we looked at a corridor that was in here closer to, this is somewhere near Geico. It's just this side of Geico. And then you also had, and this, by the way, shows what an extension of Mine Road would look like, and that's something that's still on the table and discussed a lot. But we also had a corridor, this corridor 5, that just improved 95, added lanes to 95, and it would have been built in combination with this little portion up here, which later became the Berea Parkway or the Stafford Parkway, depending on different iterations. And it also included a bypass of the Route 3 area. And so all those things were considered. And again, the CTB chose 1B, which came out somewhere out near where Lick Run crosses Route 3.
I would love that.
Yeah, and there's a, you know, the power line. You can see the angle of the one. That's where the power line crosses.
I know who messed this up.
But anyway, those were the ones that were discussed. There was a number of them, and there was a lot. You know, different people favored different things. Most of the time throughout the whole process, the city of Fredericksburg was never in favor of this bypass because, you know, if you're the city and everybody has to go through the city, you don't really want to see the people going away. And then later on, you know, like I said, Spotsylvania also found themselves not wanting this particular facility. So that was kind of what went on there. But the reason I'm going to this next project is not outer connector, but it's very related. So if we go to the next slide, go down the road a few more years, and the George Washington Toll Road Authority was created. Well, I'm going to show you the map first, then we'll go into the little timeline of it. These two maps meet here like this. This is 95, here's the river. And what it involved was some improvements up here at the Route 17 at 133, CD roadways. So if you look out here now, you'll see some familiar elements. But it came off as a north-facing only interchange that went just north of the rest area, right here is about where the ballpark is, and came out and followed across River Road and then followed River Road just to the south and came in out near Gordon Road, back opposite Gordon Road.
Where the Lidl is now.
Yes. And, so this got some traction and, got some, attention from the General Assembly, hence the Toll Road Authority. And if you go to the next slide, I'll just give you a brief history of that. This one only hung around for 5 years.
So if we start now by 2075, we.
So, very similar, sort of, ingracious end to it. It just, you know, it was like.
Did you vote against it?
Now, there was
4 new supervisors in 2012 that voted against it.
right, and that's exactly what happened.
It really was the outer connector number 5 option if you go back to it.
Indeed. Indeed, it was.
Yeah.
Yep. So that, you know, we put some time and effort into that. Of course, it was supported by the silver companies, it, you know, promoted.
And the city liked it.
And the city
But
liked
that's the only, because it supports the city.
So anyway, that one went on by. So a little bit later, if we go to the next slide.
Do you like any?
We decided we needed to look at all of these things together. We looked at an outer connector, we looked at the toll road, there were a number of different alternatives of the outer connector that I earlier mentioned that, you know, I didn't show the slides on.
Yeah.
But we put them all together here, and then we also went out and said, okay, does anybody have any other ideas? And we got more ideas. Mr. Ross is probably the author of one of those ideas. I believe this is recorded. But you can see the outer connector was still on here. Eastern bypass, that tied in here at Mills Drive, Route 17, down here at New Post. You know, some other bypasses that would have gone out through below Spotsylvania Courthouse, tied in at a new interchange somewhere down south of 126.
I think that south one is a power line still, maybe, to this day.
It's a what?
A power line still runs along there?
Okay, probably, yeah. And, again, Mr. Ross, I'll let you describe yours if you'd like. His idea was, if we're gonna go out, let's go on out, right? And this
So
ties
far
in.
out, though.
That's 10 miles from Route 3. Not that far.
That's far.
And does that still end in Spotsylvania or in another county?
That was ended in Orange.
Yeah, this is, Lake of the Woods, right here, and there's Route 20.
Highway 20 right
Oh
there.
my God, that's so far.
But you can see, of course, we had the battlefields drawn, and you can see how we had to miss those, but you also
The city did not like this plan.
So he liked it?
No, the city didn't.
No, I know. I heard, so you liked it.
All right. Guys, Mr. Haynes, go on.
And you can also see that we were looking at the river crossing itself. We were looking at that same corridor that we've seen before here. And there was some talk of a crossing of the river up into, between the Celebrate and Virginia. Lots of different things. Well, we looked at the benefit to cost analysis for all of them. It's, where does this come out? Where do we get the most use? So we go to the next slide. The two that came out as recommendations, not surprisingly,
There they are.
the outer connector, northwest quadrant was one of them. And again, it was benefit to cost analysis. And the other option was to build part of the northwest, which was the Stafford Parkway, and that same location that, later became or earlier had become.
Plus the new bridges, right?
Right, and this little red section is the part that is a lot of what we're seeing built today. So part of essentially the outer connector, and, one of the, alternatives of it is what we're seeing built today, whether we think of it that way or not. Obviously, the CD system was a part of all of these, is what we're seeing. But, so, this was the most recent, and that's why we show you this, is the most recent study that we did that kind of came back to the same conclusion. But it's gotten no legs, it's just a recommendation. It's just there to say, okay, there is something we can do, but do we want to do it? So, that pretty much ends my presentation, and Michelle's going to describe to you how we can build that.
I'm just gonna stand right here.
If we want to.
That has just one slide, it's kind of brief. And you kind of pick up on a couple ideas that Stephen already talked about, so these are re-explain things and things. This is kind of how any project that you talked about, really a large scale project. and you start with some kind of idea or some kind of problem or issue that you want to solve. So that is first, you identify that. And then we have to, and sometimes we'll talk about how we get that idea. It can come from a group, a board, county, a locality, an MPO. It can come from some kind of study, like our V-Trans identifies where we have issues. You know, we look at all of our districts at top 100 accident locations. We have all of our pipeline studies going on right now across the state. We're identifying projects. We have corridor studies. These are a little bit older, but we used to do more corridor studies where we had more, green fields that we would, build new roads through with development in more areas. It's a little bit harder to build a lot of new roads around. We get our ideas from all of those areas. So once you have your idea or your problem that you want to solve, we have to get it incorporated first into some kind of formal planning document. And really, if you're in an MPO area, like in Fredericksburg, here with our MPO, really step number one is getting it into your long-range plan first, and then into your constrained long-range plan to really give it some legs. Sometimes that's a little bit of a balancing act, because, in your FAMPO area, if you want to get something into your constrained plan right now, if we have a fiscally constrained plan, something comes in that's big, something has to go out. One new interchange on 95, everybody here would have to agree, you gotta take something else that's in there now, one of your projects, out to get something big in there. So after we get this concept in there, especially for a very large-scale project, like we've been talking about, something like another outer connector, a bypass, a new interchange on I-95, that would require some kind of alternatives analysis. I know many people think, oh, I've got the solution right here, I know exactly what I wanted to look at, but the NEPA process is going to dictate that, no, you don't. You have to do some alternatives analysis, you have to develop your purpose and needs statement, really what's at the heart of that. You can't predispose a solution. I know Stephen flashed up there the George Washington Toll Road Authority we had a few years ago, and you saw that it was a partial interchange that he flashed up there. Well, that partial interchange that we finally arrived at, for some of you that were around, and I was around with that was after about 2 years of hard fighting with the FHWA and looking at many iterations of full interchanges and all kinds of other squiggly lines. And Mr. Ross, you probably remember those meetings too, but we had, you have to look at all of those different things. And even for other corridor locations, you have to look at different alternatives. Ms. Baum, you mentioned Falmouth intersection. We looked at, over the course of many years, a whole bunch of different things, and we tried to solve that. Eventually we got to an at-grade intersection improvement when we built the Salmon after many years of being on the books and nothing really happening. We finally got something there. So that's part of that initiation of NEPA and some high-level traffic analysis and that alternatives analysis there needed to come up with a preferred alternative. After you get that preferred alternative, that's when you can start making some funding opportunities, exploring how you're going to fund such a project. Ian mentioned today, there's grant opportunities out there. There's some opportunities, obviously, through the state system, whether that's smart scale, whether it's through your NPO, whether that's through revenue sharing, other things like that. Obviously, you're not going to revenue share one of these big mega projects, but there are all kinds of funding opportunities out there. And then finally, you get down to your detailed design and delivery. And if you're going to ask about a time frame for all of this, you're looking at least 10 plus years to do that. I mean, some of the examples that we can talk about around here, I started working on the 630 interchange in earnest at that design and probably, maybe about the NEPA phase in 2008, and we cut the ribbon in 2019. And that 630 was identified in the late mid-90s to be rebuilt as the major investment study for the 627 interchange. So you can see how long it took to kind of get through all those steps, to get it in the pipeline and then get it funded, and then for us to do all the engineering. Same with the river crossings. I started working on the IJR, which was the final traffic analysis for those river crossing projects in 2010. We're going to finish the southbound project final in about a month or so. And then the northbound project will finish in 2024. So that gives you kind of some time frames about how long some of these really big projects take to kind of get them baked. So I'd be happy to answer any questions, or Stephen, questions about the picture. But thank you.
Thanks.
Do we have any questions?
I more have a couple of comments. So when Stephen started briefing this, he talked about the Centerport Parkway and how that was just open land, right? But now it's not. So for Stafford just to do the Berea Parkway portion of that is now so much more difficult than it would have been 10 years ago because there's now homes there. So the outer connector that went to Orange County, if you think about your tractor trailer traffic that needs to go, to Charlottesville or to get to 64, it's coming down 17, it's going to I-95, the bottleneck, and 17 is a bottleneck coming south on it, right? And it's coming down Route I-95, and it's going back out Route 3, right to the Highway 20 to get over to 64. A lot of traffic is, and if you also look at that, now with homes in that far outer connector thing, there's not homes out there, but there will be in the future. So that's why it looks appealing. And then the only thing I'll throw in there is the city has bought the rights to the river, like an easement all the way up the river, all the way up to like the Rapids. So I don't know, that's a question for REDOT. We definitely need all three municipalities on it. For whatever reason, Fredericksburg does not like that because it takes traffic away from shopping. I think Fredericksburg, you guys can tell me if that's still the case, but we would need Fredericksburg on, and I don't know how those easements you have on the river going all the way up to, like Mott's Run Reservoir is in Spotsylvania County, but the city owns it.
Make it like a federal.
Just take it over.
Yeah, just-
Annex them.
Yeah.
So did you say that it was, excuse me, Mr. Chairman, did you say that it was probably possible to build a portion of that?
I think the Berea.
Yeah, in Stafford.
But that's now a political hot potato for your board to handle because of the homes that have been built there. I would say.
You're talking about.
Yeah, that was another study that the county did, and VDOT participated in about 6 years, 7 years ago. And we did look at that, and there were several, funding options, potential tolls, restricting whether you build just a truck route, no trucks, and we looked at all sorts of alternatives for it. And now it's on the shelf as well, but there is data there.
I had a request by former county supervisor from Stafford County to meet with a property owner and developer out there who owns large chunks of the land and is developing it around what was that Berea Parkway.
I think it would make sense, but I remember your board did not have the political willpower to do it. They did not want to.
The point is, he has designed his whole real estate development, leaving that piece of land that would need to be the roadway out, vacant, not building them. You're the guys who know the area. I don't know the area very well, but I was asked to have a meeting with him, and he was.
What's his name?
Dick Ward. Jericho. Ward.
Okay.
All right, thank you so much for the presentation. Really appreciate the history and the information there. All right, let's move on to item 8C, Smart Scale Round 5. Ms. Barber?
Barbara is not well today, so she said she would try and do the presentation from home. So I believe she's online and she'll do the presentation for you, but it's a very brief smart scale update.
Yes, good evening. Can you hear me?
Oh, yes.
Okay, great. Yes, this will be very brief. There's not much to update you on, just a couple things. Go ahead to slide 3. Okay, as you can see, we're in April right now, and April's about to close out. VDOT will be assessing the pre-applications and basically taking a look at them over the next couple months. Next slide. As you know, right now we have 5 on each GWRC and FAMPO. 1 will have to be removed from each list. And you have seen all of these. They're in your packet, so you can take a look at them when you have time. But for tonight, let me just call your attention to number 7, slide 7. right here. There is an update on this afternoon. We met with the localities, VDOT, and the consultant to go ahead and refine the scope on this project. So by the next time I see you, I'll have a much more detailed slide to show you for this one. The rest of them are basically the same. So let's go on to slide 10. As a reminder for what is coming up. So we will talk to TAC and get their recommendations for prioritizing these and dropping one from each side. I will shortly be sending out requests for economic development data for each application site. So be on the lookout for that. And everything else, we're just working on it through till August 1st, which is our full application deadline. And that is pretty much all I have for you this evening. Do you have any questions?
Does anyone have any questions for Ms. Barber? All right, thank you so much for the update. Hope you're feeling better soon.
Thank you.
All right, 8D, Congestion Mitigation and Air Quality Improvement Program and SDGB update. Mr. Ellis, Ms. Chandler.
Jordan will walk you through the slides with this. We have got a first draft, but subsequently VDOT has informed us that we have a little extra funds. So what you're seeing now is what we showed to the TAC, which is the first draft. We're going to make an updated draft, which will come to you next month, but Jordan will just give you a snapshot of where we are right now.
Yeah, so as Ian mentioned, our progress to date, we received 3 applications based on our modified call for projects that you guys approved. And then we held a screening call with each of the applicants to make sure they met all the criteria for the application. And then we moved on to scoring and ranking the projects. Staff discussed the need specifically for STBG funds, since that was not part of the modified call for projects, and what needs were on the list that needed to be filled financially. And then last month we brought to you a draft of these allocations for each CMAQ, STBG, and HIP fund. And then we presented that to the TAC and the policy committee. And then on the next slide, after the TAC meeting in March, VDOT gave some feedback about overfunding based on the project cost estimates that had changed in the last year. And FAMPO staff organized a meeting between the localities and VDOT to discuss those changes and those needs. We also received the draft budget for FY 23 through 28, so there was more funding in each fiscal year based on the estimates that VDOT gave to us. And we also had some previous year allocations, CMAQ and STBG, that needed to be allocated as well. So we can move on to the next slide. And then the one after that shows in green the updated funds. So this is how much additional funds we got for each year. For each source, it's about $1.5 million, excluding the FY 28 funds, because we left that out of the modified call for projects, because we didn't want to allocate that this year, because we were still negotiating and working through the project selection process, and there were still some questions on that. So we just held that money, and in the last slide, you'll see that that would be part of the September process for the next year. So these are the updated funds based on the year. So staff came up with a plan of how to spend these monies by each source. First, CMAQ, which is the Congestion Mitigation and Air Quality Funding. Based on those applications we received in the modified call for projects, we couldn't fill the need that was asked initially without this new draft budget. So with the new draft budget, we can fill the requested needs. So all those requests will be fulfilled. And there was also 2 other projects on the list that also had a need. So Pennsylvania New Transit and then the 3 bus purchase replacement from Fred. Those were projects from last year that still had a need that we can also work to fill. They won't be filled in full, but they will be filled additionally than what they have on now. And then for the surface block grant money, the STBG on the next slide, we have 2 projects that were on the list that had additional needs, and this has been adjusted based on this month with talking with VDOT, and this will be part of the proposal and updates next month. But these were 2 projects that needed funding, Route 1 at exit 126 southbound, and then Garrisonville Road widening project. And then FAMPO staff had a few requests as well. We needed about $30,000 for the financial closeout of the 2050 LRTP throughout the last pandemic years. In the CMAQ STBG process, money was moved off of the project to fund the needs on roadway projects, and so the last invoices came back with the consultant, and there was a need of about $30,000. And then there's a need of about $30,000 that we requested for the Freight Summit that Ian had originally discussed with you in his admin slides, and being able to host that summit in the coming year.
Thanks,
So
John.
this is, the idea is that these will be addressed in FY '27?
No, we are, if you just go back a
Well,
couple of
I've
slides.
seen the FY '27 STBG and CMAX, I didn't,
There.
So
See the green money?
yeah.
So each year, there's some green money that is additional that's been made available to us. So we will take the green money and allocate it to that list of items that we've shown you on the
Okay.
slide.
I just didn't know why you called out 27.
if you go forward one slide, it's the previous through FY '27. So
Okay,
previous
through
is anything behind FY '23, so FY '23 is current. So previous is anything prior to that, and then through FY '27.
I just would say this to you, that this, and Susan is right there, because Susan and myself and Becky and Jordan work on this thing. It is really complicated. We're giving you the high-level summary. It's really complicated because you have to, money is given to you in this financial year, and then some in the next year, and then in the next year. And if you've got the wrong amount of money in the wrong funding source in the wrong year, you then got to fiddle with all the other years and all the other funding sources to try and get it into the right year so you can allocate it to this damn project. Then you muck up all your other projects in the process. So we don't bring you that level of detail because honestly, you'll be here the whole night
Unless
sitting
Cindy was
trying.
here, then we'd have to do it.
Say again?
Unless Cindy Shelton was here.
We don't bring you that level of detail, but we do bring you the projects and the amounts of money, so that if you don't want us to spend that money on that project, you can tell us. That we're quite happy to hear. Just don't start asking about, why is there $3 extra in FY, we'll be here the whole night.
All right, Ms. Bomke.
So I do have a question, if you go to the next slide or the following one, right there. What are you spending $30,000 on for the Freight Summit?
The number of things, we have to host the day, so we need to provide lunch, and we need to provide coffees and donuts and all that kind of thing. We also, no, not for $30,000, trust me, we're doing inexpensive lunches. What we are doing is also getting a consultant. We haven't appointed one yet, so this is future. So it only goes into the UPWP, which you'll see I'm going to present as the next item on the agenda. So the consultant needs to write a report on that. So they need to bring a facilitator to facilitate the discussion with all the freight companies. They need to ask the questions. They need to keep records of those questions. They need to then do data analysis of the freight numbers, like where is the congestion? It's an analysis of the data points. And then they need to write a report. And that report then becomes a FAMPO. It's like a mini study, but it's a formal report, which we can then take and use as the document to explain to VTrans, VDOT, et cetera. So they're going to write that report for us to present the results of the summit. So it's a whole process. It's venue, it's food, it's paying a consultant to facilitate the discussions, to write all the notes of the meeting, to draft a report, to put all the data analysis into the report, plus the comments from the freight companies that have come there, then produce the report for FAMPO. So it's a whole bunch of things like that.
So the summit is in September of this year, and then there will be a compilation of a report that will be presented to FAMPO after we have all the data.
Correct. Like we present you the results of a study in a report, and then the consultant stands there and explains it to you, and you decide whether to support and approve the study's report or not. Same thing. We're going to present the detailed report.
No, I understand what it's for. I don't have a problem with that, but when I see a freight summit, it's actually a lot more comprehensive than that, and most of it is probably going to be for the consultant.
There is a substantial amount of that will be paid to the consultant.
Correct.
To facilitate and write the report and so on. We're busy working with two potential consultants. They're both our on-call consultants, so you've already approved them to work for us. But we're still discussing with them about which one we're going to use and how much they will charge us and that kind of thing.
Okay, that's fine. Thank you.
I try really hard, and you'll have seen this in the past, I try really hard to get one consultant, and I try to whittle down sometimes their costs if I think they're too excessive. So you will see that if you compare some of the prices we've paid in the past for studies and what we're paying now. Be paying more. I've managed to keep the costs down, and I won't do this in a public forum, but I'll happily privately work you through the numbers. We're getting value for money at the moment, trust me.
Good.
You said consultant, I thought, well, if we agree to get price to do that whole thing, on the food and everything, and a consultant for that price, so we
Yeah.
can keep it in that, it's good.
There'll be a few dollars extra, but we'll use that from the rural work program because the rural counties also want to participate. So King George and Caroline County are also going to attend, and so we'll use a small amount of money, but it's much smaller. It's not like 30,000. It's just a few thousand.
Going back to, not going to go into all the complicated details, but curious if we know, what fiscal year we expect the work to begin on these projects.
So this LRTP is complete. You approved it last sitting. We're just closing that out. So it's a question of the FAMPO Policy Committee on the TAC moved $109,000 over the years off that project. And when we came to the end to pay the bills, we realized, actually, you can't have all that 109,000. We need 30,000 back to finish paying off the bills.
Well, I mean all the
so
other.
That's finished. Yeah. The one for the Freight Summit is happening this year in September. Those other projects have got a particular year in which they need the funds, and Jordan can show you those slides on which year.
Yeah, so these two projects are between FY25 and FY27, so the mid to out years if you go back to the other slide. So these three that we got in this modified call for projects are all like current to FY25, so they're in the beginning of the timeline. And then these two are again like FY26 to 27, so here's the timeline. So there's a range.
Thank you.
And then on the very last slide, just the next steps. We discussed this month the draft allocations and then the comments from DOT and made changes accordingly. So we'll come next month to the TAC and the policy for committee endorsement and approval. And then this will go to the CTB to be implemented in the STIP, which is the state plan. And then in September, we're going to begin the process all over again with the FY24 through 29. So we'll get another year in there and allocate some more money.
And I'll just make two last comments and then I'll shut up. So one is we have taken this opportunity to try and back fund existing projects because we've got a lot of these projects that have got insufficient funds and they're sitting there. And we want to close them out and get them constructed because we want to actually complete projects. Not have all 100 more projects and we give them each $10,000. And they'll sit there for years before they get built. We're trying to close out projects that we had, that were on the books when I arrived here, plus the 3 new ones. But we're trying to close out with old money, old projects, get them built, get them into construction or final design. In September, we're going to have a call for new projects from all the jurisdictions. So if you have new roadways, if you have new whatever you have, and we've on purpose allocated this year's new money for FY28 plus the money we're going to get next year combined, we're going to allocate it to all those new projects, and that's going to be a substantial amount of money, $5 to $6 million. So we've designed it very carefully to do that. Get rid of the old projects by funding them and putting them out to final design and construction where we can. And then in the fall, we start the new process where we've got a bunch of money set aside for all those new projects coming in. So I think that's what we've tried to do. Final comment is we're going to bring you the final spreadsheet with all those details of every project and every dollar that's going to every project, which Susan has been helping us work on. Jordan spends a lot of time on. So you'll get a detailed opportunity to critique and vote yes if you agree with them. However, if anything we've said to you today you don't approve of, please tell me, because then I need to adjust it before I bring you that final list. So if any of those things you think is grossly wrong, then do tell me so I can adjust it before I bring you the final approval list.
And the same proposal went to the TAC and they didn't have any issues.
Great. All right. Thank you so much.
Everybody happy? Okay.
All right. Item 8E, the draft FY23 UPWP. Mr. Olson's golden.
I've asked Becky just to run you through the slides. She did it for the TAC. Becky is our planning manager. And the UPWP, we've adjusted since it went to the TAC simply because we were advised by DRPT and VDOT that there were revised funding allocations. Now, this is funding for staff to pay salaries, to pay for the rent for the building, and all the other things that we do. So we've adjusted this Also, I've removed 2 projects. The one project I removed, are you going to mention those?
I will.
Okay,
Sure.
I'll leave you to do it. Thanks. So Becky will walk you through it. Thanks.
Great. The highlights of the Unified Planning Work Program are, and Ian has spoken about 2 of them already, the 2022 Freight Summit and the FAMPO Vision Plan. The others that are noteworthy are the FRED Transit Strategic Plan and the 2 big studies that are underway, the East-West Mobility Study Phase 2 and the VCR Trail Study that Ms. Barber will be managing. The 2 projects that we deleted from the UPWP are those that for which the funding does not run through our books. They were in the current FY22 UPWP, and that is the Route 610 Stafford County Operational Study, and that money and project will be managed by Stafford, and you won't see it in our UPWP, but it is in the CMAQ and STBG project lists. The second one is the GW Ride Connect Strategic Plan. Again, those funds don't run through our books, so in the past, when we did our money and expenditure and so forth, it was just an awkward accounting amount that sort of needed a home, I guess, for the last year or so. So that wraps up the highlights of the FY23 UPWP.
All right, thank you. Does anybody have any questions for Ms. Golden? All right, at this time, we need a resolution.
Chairperson, we're not asking for approval of that UPWP. You still have another whole month to comment and give us edits if you want to change anything. But we're asking you to allow us to put it out for public comment so that we can do the 30-day public comment period. So that's what we're asking for, please.
Yes, so there's a resolution for approving the public comment period, 30-day public comment period.
I'll move for resolution 2232.
Second. All right, thank you. Hearing motion in a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Chair votes aye, motion carries. Thank you. All right, so now that that has been approved, item 8E2, Special Executive Committee meeting, currently scheduled for May 18th. Mr. Olaf, could you explain the need for the special meeting?
Sure. It's unfortunate, but it happens every year at least once, where we have to do a 30-day public comment period, and there aren't 30 days between 2 FAMPO meetings. So this is one of those cases. We'll be 2 days short. So if you have the meeting as scheduled, it's 28 days, it's not 30 days. So we are requesting, and you will need to actually vote this as a resolution, we're requesting the policy committee give the executive of FAMPO the permission to adopt the report 2 days or 3 days after your next policy committee meeting. This does not mean that you can't give input, because you will still, at the next policy committee meeting, you will still at that meeting be able to submit changes, requests, questions, everything that you normally would do, but we can't approve it on that day because we have to give the public 30 days. So it means that we would ask the executive of FAMPO to come back 2 days later or 3 days later, and I might have to buy them a beer for the extra effort and ask them to please officially adopt it at a special executive meeting. So that we're requesting you, if you're okay with that, to give permission to the executive of FAMPO to adopt the UPWP on your behalf after you've had another committee meeting where you can consider it first. That's what we're asking. It's just a calendar problem.
So that would mean, I think, Ms. Baumke, you and I would be there along with Mr. McLaughlin.
And Mr. McLaughlin, and the 3 of you plus.
And that would be on May 18th.
Correct.
And I will physically not be in the state, so I would need to have an alternate.
I can't, why, so you that night, that's why. You don't want to debate me? That's the argument.
Oh, is there a debate?
Yeah, there's a debate that.
Oh, no.
I knew you were scared.
Oh, I love it.
Put that in the minutes.
Well, Ms. Gary is...
Mr. Chair,
Okay.
we will be able to negotiate with the 3 chairs, find a date and a time that's mutually agreeable, and if not, they could nominate their alternate. So we can work that out between the two chairs. We wouldn't need to get every detail nailed down tonight. It would be great to.
So move with an amendment authorizing, the chair to identify an alternate date and time if the one presented doesn't.
Second.
All right, so let's read this resolution because we want it in the minutes. Resolution is that this policy committee meeting, is somebody writing, authorizes the FAMPO Executive Committee to meet after the 30 days has expired and adopt the UPWP on behalf of the FAMPO policy. Everybody happy with that?
Yes.
All right, hearing the motion and a second for that, do we have any further discussion?
Just one question, why couldn't we just do that at that meeting that's 2 days prior to tonight?
You could,
Do what?
have this resolution.
Oh, you can do that as well. I don't care.
Wait, we're not,
Well,
But I'm just.
Matt,
we're here now.
That would be new.
If we can do it now, we can do it
Okay.
now, but you could do it next meeting.
Yeah.
I just want to have a chance to tee the people up and check dates in calendars and times and all that kind of thing.
Yeah, this is bureaucracy.
Yes.
What if,
Calendar.
so next month GWRC is meeting separately, then we are still, we're on different paths, right?
Yes.
So do they meet the week after?
Believe.
Yeah, whatever happens.
Yes, but that's
Yes.
Memorial Weekend.
Well, but no, that's 2 weeks after. The 23rd is the GWRC, and then Memorial Day is the 30th.
I was just gonna say, I'm not trying to complicate things, we can vote on this, but if we moved our FAMPO meeting to the same night as the GWRC, then you wouldn't have this issue.
It would be the 23rd.
Yep, well, thank you for the comment.
I was asked to prepare a proposal.
Yes,
but
no, and
I'm not on GWRC, so I don't mind meeting as a, so I actually like it. I was on GWRC,
I will buy the members, the 3 members.
yeah.
All right.
So can we have a vote?
Well, is there any further discussion on the matter? All right, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Chair votes aye, motion carries.
Fantastic, thank you very much.
All right. As I mentioned at the beginning of the meeting, Chairman McLaughlin had asked to include the bylaw discussion as a point of personal privilege. I have nothing to add to this, so I will be skipping over this item.
Mr. Chair, thank you. We're happy for you to skip over it. I just want to point out that attached to your agenda tonight is just a letter received from Mr. Ivan Rucker at Federal Highways commenting on this item. And you remember you asked me to send it to him, and we pulled it up on the screen for those people who are watching at home. You don't need to do anything about it tonight. As we heard, we're going to skip over it, but I'm just alerting you to the fact that we did get this feedback from him. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you. Moving on to item 9, correspondence.
Chair, we don't have much correspondence that is new to report on tonight.
All right, thank you. Item 10, staff and agency reports.
In terms of staff, we have not had any new staff appointed or resigned this month, so I don't have any changes in staff to alert you to. I think the staff are very happy currently. I'm certainly very happy currently. And we have told you all the other staff reports in terms of the UPWP that we presented tonight. So you've got lots of detail there of what we're planning to do in the future.
Thank you very much. Are there any comments from board members?
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm Hank Scharpenberg, Chairman of CTAC. At the last meeting, we raised the issue of the outer connectors not included in the long-range transportation plan, and that being one of the reasons, probably the major reason why we declined to endorse it. Chairman asked me to come back and nominate some substitutions. We thought a better approach would be to give you a concept briefing tonight for your consideration.
Thank you.
And then depending on what you think, come back at a next meeting for a little bit more development. So, we have this teed up.
I don't know.
Gosh, I can't see this.
We don't have it online, but they're.
No, they each has a hard copy.
Okay.
Yeah.
So this may be a little bit difficult to read, but we thought about the whole issue of another crossing over the river, and it didn't seem to make much sense to build another crossing over the river just to dump traffic back on I-95, because you don't get very far very fast. Instead, we looked at the concept of an eastern and western connectors, which would allow people in the area to avoid 95 altogether and to go in any cardinal direction using existing road networks, 301, 28, 20, 15, 29, Route 2, and so on. You're familiar with the map. So I'm going to show you what that looks like, and I apologize for the scale of the map. I guess we don't have it on the computer. But we tried to maximize existing primary roads to the maximum extent possible. There are some roads that would have to be built in order to make this work, and some of those primary roads would have to be improved upon in that they would have to be broad, line of sight improved, and so on. But we think it's something worth consideration. Now, on the eastern connector, the roads that would have to be built are on the Stafford Comprehensive Plan. It is a first road on your diagram. If you go to the second slide, you can see roughly what that looks like. The eastern connector and then the western connector. And by the way, everywhere you see those black collections is population. Another reason not to try to cross the river due east or due west of 95, because you get into eminent domain condemnation and nobody wants to do that.
Right.
So we try to look for areas where we can provide alternatives for transportation and minimize the impact on the population. So if we'll go to the third slide, that eastern connector that is in the Stafford plan would start roughly where Centerport Parkway is, proceed along the south bank of Potomac Creek, intersect with Highway 218, and then 218 would allow you to take existing roads that are identified on that diagram and get you to 301. And once you're in 301, you have all sorts of options. The western connector is a little bit more sporty. We would start again in the vicinity of the Centerport Parkway. The Berea Parkway is in the Stafford Comprehensive Plan, not yet built, but Berea Church Road would get you onto 17 in the vicinity of the intersection of Berea Church Road and 17. You'd proceed to the west. At a point to the west, and the exact plot would be subject to negotiation, and that creates an interesting problem. I'll talk about that in just a second. You would then travel along relatively unusable land for development purposes under easements for utility lines, land that doesn't perk, not good for much else. You have to build two bridges, one over the Rapidan, one over the Rappahannock. You'd come into Route 3. It would provide an opportunity for the people who live down there to get out of that area when they wanted to travel north or south. If you still wanted to go east back towards Fredericksburg, you have that option, but then you have options to go to the northeast or the southwest. Now, the reason I say that particular connector is an interesting problem is because of its final plot. It would involve jurisdictions that are not part of this FAMPO, potentially Culpeper and Orange counties. But I think a case could be made that it would be favorable and appealing to them. Now, we'll provide you these slides in better format so you can take a look. But we wanted you to hear about this as an alternative to a outer crossing and give you options east and west for residents to avoid 95 altogether, because we all know a lot of fun that is. So I would like to bring this back to you as a next policy meeting in a little bit more detail for your further consideration. And we're also going to bring back an amendment to the long-range transportation plans, strategic goals that was approved by our CTAC at the last meeting, dealing with handicapped opportunities and things like that. Any questions from the policy committee to me tonight? I didn't mean to take a lot of time, but I wanted to broach this to you so you could start thinking about it. And of course, I'm available to answer any questions you might have. We'll provide more detailed drawings to you so you get a better sensing for the lay of the land. And like anything else, modification is within the realm of the doable in order to make this work. Yes, sir.
Are there members from the city on your team?
From who?
The city of Fredericksburg.
Yes.
And are they supportive of this idea?
We, the vote from the CTAC was 9-4. 9 in favor, 4 opposed. I don't remember offhand who did or who did not.
Some city representatives didn't support it.
No. All right. Well, thank you for bringing this to our attention. The reason, at the last meeting, I asked about the...
No, perfectly good question, but I wasn't going to presuppose the answer.
Well, no, but but the point still remains that we have a very difficult decision to make if we were to do this as to what would be taken off in the constrained long-range plan. And, you know, this is why I was asking if CTAC was, you know, if CTAC is serious about this, then we need to know what this is more important than. This is, I mean, we have to understand the level of priority. Yes, Mr. Ross?
I don't think that's accurate, is it? I mean, because there could be new money for this, a new project. You wouldn't have to take something off in order to put this on, is that?
Why would, I'm gonna make it rain.
Roads.
No, that's the rules, but those.
Your current constrained plan, like you want to do, improve White Oak Road, and yes, you have to take something, and your constrained long-range plan.
I don't remember this ever happening in the past. When we were looking at this in 2013, I don't remember saying, you know, we're moving forward with this, because we had traction. We had Culpeper and Orange on board until Matt single-handedly killed this as chairman, sending a letter to Culpeper and Orange asking them to fund the study, which we didn't even talk about in our meeting. But I don't remember it ever coming up that we needed to get rid of something to add something else to it.
Well, if you want to fund a study, that's different than adding.
Sure. Sure. And the first part of it is the study. Okay, maybe that's right.
Yeah.
And if I could just add on to the comment, as you pointed out, the 630 interchange from start to completion was 11 years. So there's a lot of work that has to be done. There are a lot of wild cards and other things that have to be considered. But as we mentioned to you at the last meeting, to do nothing is not an option.
I do have one more question. So I asked this when we were talking earlier, so you can see the purple, this map? That's a Fredericksburg easement. How does that, I mean, clearly if we're gonna do something, we need Fredericksburg support.
Well, there's a spot right here we can go.
No, they've closed the gap. They've got the whole thing now. And the reason is, first of all, like, why are you guys doing that? But I think you want people to come to the city.
They like traffic.
They like the traffic there, I guess. But anyway, but does that prevent this from happening, just even from the city? Can you change that so that we can do a river crossing across the purple, or does anybody know that?
I don't know definitively.
As I recall, there
Feds can
were
do anything.
4 cuts allowed in that easement that was purchased in 2004. To validate that, verify that.
I think you purchased some since 2013.
Don't believe so.
No? Okay, I hope you're right. I thought you had.
No, it was, to my recollection, 2006, before I was with the city, the city purchased 4,000 acres, as you described. I don't think they've done anything since then.
Would you check on that, just make sure?
Sure.
I was pretty sure that there were some gaps in there, and I thought the city purchased those gaps since 2013.
I'll be happy to check.
Okay.
Yep.
So I have a question that is kind of a repeat, but in regards to if anyone was supported from Fredericksburg, and then I think the answer was that they were against it,
That's
but
correct.
so no one was in favor of it, is that?
That was actually my understanding.
Oh, okay.
And I mean, and I'll say here for the record, I'm not in support of it either, not because I want the traffic. But
Well, it has
I'm happy to explain why.
I would love to hear why.
Absolutely. So as I look at this and I see, you know, someone had referred to it, you know, affectionately as the Fredericksburg Beltway. I think I heard someone say that earlier. Looking at other projects like this across America, it doesn't matter where you talk about, it turns out it doesn't actually have a long-term impact on traffic. It turns out that these types of projects turn into a massive waste of money. And in fact, I'll give you an example. In Rochester, New York right now, they are actually tearing down what they call the inner loop. And they are seeing zero impact on traffic, even though they are taking away the road. Because all it does is it just tells people, oh, there's more road, oh, I can just keep driving. And you end up with with people on the roads more and more. And as this area continues to grow, it gives people the idea that they can drive to all of their destinations. Unfortunately, building new roads like this that just take people further and further out, I don't believe is a good economic development driver for this region. I just don't believe it.
Are you thinking that it takes away from public transportation? Is that?
It's not as much that it takes away from public transit, is that new roads just haven't been proven to reduce traffic. You know, LA, Houston.
When you drive south to Richmond and go run the Richmond bypass, I mean, that certainly, instead of going through the city.
I think that's
No, but
a
if you,
little more narrow than this, though.
well, but,
This is pretty wide.
I mean, this thing's crazy wide,
When I look
but,
at this, I think about the Beltway,
yeah.
if I may, up north. So I'm from,
But it's not that big.
well, I know, but it's
Yes.
not as small as like if you're bypassing
more
Richmond
like-
either. So it's maybe somewhere in between there. But I can't see living in Stafford to get down, I'm gonna go all
You
the
have to
way
go the
down
red
Highway
line.
Street.
No, there's another line right here for Stafford. I can't tell because.
The red line,
I'm
Again,
looking at
this
the
is
red
not
on the right
intended
and the
to
red
be
on-
a 360 connector.
the
It's
red line.
intended to provide, using existing roads to the maximum extent possible, the option for people to go to the west and be able to go in different directions, or to the east and go in different directions.
I'm just wondering when I look at it,
Mhm.
if a compromise would be somehow getting us closer, and if that's the goal, but a starting point. I think that we need it. Don't know
A
what
smaller loop, is that what you're talking about?
Yeah.
So,
With that is it's been developed. So now when you take,
There's
a
no-
lot of the cost of developing a road is taking property, and he mentioned it, it's eminent domain, it's condemning property, you're in your house and we're gonna boot you out. The house you grew up in or the house you have your family in right now, and it's going. So if you look at the density, you see these black dots, is a population?
I did look at that, so all the way through there's nothing.
no.
So the outer one, at least in 2013, had like 4 homes.
Okay.
I don't know what it has now.
And the other issue is, okay, let's say you develop something like this, then you're going to have the inevitable development around these roads, and then the inevitable congestion that comes with that when your only option is to get in a car and go. When you don't give people the option of anything besides a car, this is how congestion happens. Because this type of development, it will crowd out other investments. And this is why one of the reasons I ask about, other things that we could be doing. I mean, even surface transit, or transportation, not just transit, but I mean, like intersection improvements, as opposed to something like this. I mean, this level of investment right here would crowd out so many other projects to the point that I believe it's to the point of extinction of several
I do agree that there
others.
are a lot of intersections and road improvements that can help this congestion.
Exactly, and those are more targeted.
I don't think this should be off the table, it really is important.
But that's why I asked for what would need to come off the table and see what the policy committee believes about the trade-offs that are needed to make for this project to happen.
Can we keep looking
We
at
don't
it
know what
before
the
we
price is
decide
yet.
that we need to pull something off?
Well, we have some pretty good ideas of the price, and I'll go to Mr. Ross and then Ms. Bomke.
So a couple things. When they were trying to do the George Washington Toll Road, they had limits on exits. In other words, you could do the same thing with an outer connector where you're like, you know what, there's going to be no, we're going to put intersections at every 3 miles and no more, or 4 miles, or whatever that might be, which would cause what you're saying, and really, wherever you do, it's like Rupert said, you're still here, you can't pave your way out of congestion, but this would create additional, you've been in I-95 where we have a jumper, right? Or maybe you haven't, or you have a chemical spill on I-95, and it's a 7-8 hour day. I mean, look what just happened with the snowstorm, right?
We had
right.
nowhere to go.
Nowhere to go. I was there on January 4th, taking the back roads home, and it's a long back road home.
So just a technical question to VDOT. Are there situations where future potential off-ramps on a highway or a main road are precluded by formal decision where it can never happen? Because the proposal here is that you could build an outer connector with only very few off-ramps, because you want people to go through, you don't want them to get off.
Yes, sir.
But does that not get changed over time, where the next lot of politicians come along and say, no, but we need another off-ramp, and we need another one, and we need another one?
No, certain classes of ways can be built with what we call limited access, where you can only have certain access points, like intersections or grade separated areas.
And that would be in perpetuity?
Route 17 through Spotsylvania County in certain areas, limited access right now. There are certain other roads in the area that are limited access where you control the access points, where you can't have commercial entrances, you can't have private driveways, you only have major cross streets.
And that would be in perpetuity. Someone else can't come along and say, no, I'm changing all that.
Only the Commonwealth Transportation Board can change that.
Yeah. One of the things that you'll have to fight with this, is something called triple convergence theory. I don't know if you guys heard of this. It's very well known in the traffic management and transportation man modeling world. You had nowhere to go, so you didn't take your trip. You took a back road.
Had to, or I wasn't going home.
You shifted your time of day. All of those things happen. The second you build a new road, the second you build a new road, people stop traveling in the morning. People stop taking the alternate road, and they start taking the trip, and they fill the road. You won't resolve the traffic problem.
Then we never need to build a new road.
That's actually,
We can just have buses.
that's
So, it's not a bus.
That's really a big.
I'm being sarcastic.
When you look at,
hold on. Let Mr. Snyder finish this point, and then we're going to Ms. Baumke.
So it's really not a bus issue, because this is not a bus corridor. This is a throughput issue. And if you look at much of what DRPT did, especially focused on 66, 395 and their grant programs, the funding mechanisms and what they supported was throughput. Didn't matter. You could build something new if you could justify the throughput. And so that's what a lot of this is. So I would just consider reframing the concept is what is the throughput? What are those choke points? What are those through points? And if you haven't had the chance yet to do some of the survey work, I think VDOT described some of the pipeline projects. So those are specifically looking at 2-mile sections of hell. That's where it's just traffic sets. A great example of that would be 17, right there from I-95, 2 to 3 miles north. That's a pipeline project. So how many roads could you seal off? Would it be, this is what they look at, would it be cheaper to just connect just build one thing behind it to connect all the people trying to hop? Those are examples of what is done in lieu of building the new road. That's just what I would frame looking at it differently. And yes, you can do the limitations of there's only an exit every so far. It doesn't matter. They will still, because if there's no other way, people will still drive. There are people that are currently commuting every single day from Richmond to DC, or they're at least getting to Spotsylvania. They're willing to do that to commute into DC. It's not about traffic congestion, convenience, it's about cheap housing. And wherever there is cheap housing, people will go. And that is one of the single biggest drivers, and especially in the Northern Virginia and the urbanized market. So if I can get the same house for $100,000 cheaper, I will just move out there because it's cheaper for me to drive the extra 10 miles to the next exit. And they have to put exits in at some point. Otherwise, you don't have safety, you don't have public response access for firefighters, highway response, all of those kinds of things. So it's going to be a huge, I don't have the answer. I'm not pretending to. If I did, I'd be asking for the consultant money that you approved earlier.
Not enough.
But it's a big issue that it's a generational discussion. And so there's some of those things to really think about. And I encourage that from if you build it, they will come.
All right.
Reality.
Yeah, agreed. Thank you.
Thanks.
All right, Ms. Baumke.
So I would just like to say, you know, I had relatives in for the Easter holiday, and it is just really sad that they all have to leave at 9 o'clock in the morning before the Easter service to get on the interstate, because it took them 5.5 hours to get here from South Jersey. And I mean south, the number 3 exit on Friday. So I'm so tired of having these conversations with my relatives. One of them that they asked the other day, and one gentleman travels all over the Mid-Atlantic corridor because he's a scout for a baseball team. He said, Meg, it's not like this anywhere else. But his question was, and I never asked this question, he said, is there something on 95 with the up and down and the signs above? Is there something regarding the acceleration of people driving habits that is causing some of the slowdowns? And then does VDOT have an answer to any of that?
So the fact, I I try to do facts because I don't have a political opinion, or I'm not supposed to ever. Into Boston, it's the same. It's exactly the same as this problem on I-95 here. This is not the only place it occurs. This is one of the worst.
It is the worst.
Well, no.
No, it literally.
We won the award.
The number one
Boston
worst
is
stretch of highway.
Boston is worse stuff.
But you're right.
Which year you're talking, and it depends who's doing the counting. Is it Texas A&M doing the counting, or is it INRIC's doing the counting, or, I mean, it depends who's doing the counting. Boston fights with you for that top.
That's pretty bad.
Same story, same problem, same issue. Have the same problem in Los Angeles, and I think Seattle, I forget the listing, but there's a whole ranking, and they do the ranking every year. There are about 10 places in the US where it is absolutely frightening, and it's always a bunch of big highways that they can just never build enough lanes, enough off-ramps, enough everything. This is one of them. This is one of them. It's a national choke point. However, congestion is a factor of two things. And any model that you look at in any Department of Transportation you talk to, you've got to deal with the same two things. The volume to capacity ratio. It yes, the bad driving adds to it, which is why they're doing the variable speed limits, because they're trying to adjust so to make the people behave. So you don't ride right up to the butt of the car in front of you, and then everybody else has to slam on brakes, and so there's driving that does make it worse. But it's the volume to capacity ratio. That's the thing that causes congestion. When you have more people driving than you have space. And I posted on Facebook and Twitter and everywhere else a picture of what Paris would look like if they carry on building lanes and just carry on building lanes and carry on building lanes. There's just the Eiffel Tower and highways. You can't see anything else anymore. It's irony, but that's what they did in Los Angeles, 16-lane highways. Part of what these guys are saying is actually proven fact, that there's this metric called induced demand, right? They don't have a solution, unfortunately, but they do understand the problem clearly. And the problem is that it's called induced demand. Build it and they will come. So when you build extra lanes, there's a fixed period of time after which those lanes will be full, and you'll have to build another lane. And then there's a fixed period of time. In Johannesburg, where I worked before this, it was exactly 7 years. Every time you added a lane north and a lane south, you had 7 years before it was just as congested as before you built a single concrete. So that is the problem. The problem is it's counterintuitive. It doesn't sound right. There's another counterintuitive thing. If you rip out a lane, called the road diet, go talk to the people at MIT. They ripped out lanes in Kendall Square. You rip out lanes and you expect what? You expect the congestion to get even worse. But guess what? It doesn't.
And this is what happened in Rochester.
The reason why is complicated, but it has something to do with human behavior. It's not a linear calculation. It's not like 10 people, 10 cars, 10 lanes, you get this outcome. Because what happens with human beings is they don't behave like machines. They get clever and they invent alternatives, right? And so traffic is in the game of alternatives. It's like water. It's like water running down a hill. You put more paths, more water can flow quicker. You constrain it, the water finds a new path. It goes around somewhere else. Traffic is like water. That's how it behaves. So you've got to think like that. And if you think of a zero-sum game, you never quite understand it properly. You can carry on adding lanes. You can carry on adding bypasses. You can carry on adding concrete. You will never solve it. You will solve it for a few years, maybe for 7 years. I don't know what the number is in this state or in this particular area. It varies depending on where you are. The problem with the gentleman over here, they were quite correct about understanding the problem, is that they haven't got a solution for you. So what we would
Flying cars and Teslas.
What?
Flying cars and automatic driving cars.
Yeah, that's,
do not put words in our mouth.
Everybody says.
Well, that's what I would say.
Hang on, let me just finish. I'll shut up. Automated vehicles was touted by Uber and Lyft as the answer. have you noticed how deathly silent they've gone on the topic?
No, that's because not everybody's driving them. If everybody had them.
Those automated vehicles are still not yet functional. We still can't deploy them en masse because there are some technical problems involved. The best that we've come to so far in terms of solution is options. Every time somebody finds a system that works alternatively to building more and more and more and more lanes, it's got to do with options. We've either got to get multiple modes of transportation operating in the same area, and that's proven. It's proven that heavy rail, passenger rail, alleviates traffic without the need to build more lanes of traffic, but then you're spending money on the rail, right? That's why this whole game. You spend it on one thing or you spend it on another thing, you're going to spend money. But the more options you give people, the more things they can do when it gets bad. Don't give them options, and you funnel them all into one option. It's going to be terrible because there's never going to be enough space for everybody to fit in the one option. That's the one piece of sympathy I have for another bridge over the river. That's the one piece of sympathy I have. It provides options. And the options always are better than just adding a lane, adding a lane, adding a lane. So the options are VRE, and the gentleman's gone. We have to have reverse commuting trains. We have to have trains on weekends because the flippin' track is already there. It's paid for.
Yeah.
We need reverse commuting trains to go the other way. Trains on weekends. We need more buses of OmniRide because it's a different option. We need bicycles for local movements. But I'm not totally against one more bridge over the Rappahannock if it's not exactly in the same place as all the others, because it's going to be also an option. But I do think that you've got to be careful of urban sprawl, because if you add more highways out in the boonies, people are going to go live in the boonies, and then they're going to fill up that lane of traffic, and then you're going to be coming to Stephen and Michelle saying, oh, the lovely road we built out there, it's now congested. Now we need another lane, and another lane, and another lane. It's always the same. So the solution is options.
Yep.
Options. Don't funnel everybody into, one size does not fit all. The only way you can get away from the constant more lanes and more lanes and more lanes is to provide multiple options, because people are not all the same. People like options, and when you give them options, they will tend to use options which are more effective at moving people, like putting 100 on a bus instead of 100 in 100 cars, on 100 on a train instead of 100 in 100 cars. But some people are still going to drive their car. Some people are still going to.
But it takes some off the road, not everyone.
I will be.
And that's fine. It's about
I've
choice.
been waiting for like 20 minutes to talk, so.
Well, I haven't seen your hand.
Yeah, but Ian took my 20 minutes.
I know.
All right, yeah, I will let Ms. Bomke respond and then Ms. Vanucci.
Okay, so all I'm gonna say, and that was very interesting, okay? So I feel that it is incumbent upon you, as the leader of FAMPO, to make sure that you get all the elected officials, Bob Snyder, who's been phenomenal with TRTC and his brain trust that he has in staff, and VDOT, and bring all these parties together so we can figure out what are our options gonna be. And so that we as elected officials don't end up fighting against each other, that we all somehow see whatever the data is, that the things that we maybe want to consider aren't going to work, that we are able to hit the, we call it in Stafford, the I believe button, okay?
You got it.
Well,
Meg's gonna make it a thing.
If you're not gonna get there, you know, it's not about me, Meg Bomke, it's about our region. We've got to do this together as a group. And so that's all I have to say, thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Bomke. All right, Ms. Vanucci.
So my big thing is, I mean, I've lived here pretty much my entire life, and it's gotten worse. So when I see you were working on that when I was 10 years old, man, it would really be nice to be able to get to Spotsylvania right about now. So it's sad that we've gone over 30 years with absolutely zero traction, and at this point, we can't handle no traction. We have literally no options to offer our residents. In North Stafford, if you want to get anywhere south, you literally have to take Route 1 or 95. You have very, very limited options. Or you're driving, yeah, if you live on Brooks, you just stay home. But like, we have to do something. We've got to find another way to cross the river. I can tell you that snowstorm for me was mind-blowing. And understanding, like, Stafford County was cut off practically from the world. We couldn't get inside. People from the inside couldn't get out. People from the outside couldn't get in. And that is a major public safety issue. And it was all because there was an accident on 95, then people got on Route 1, then there was an accident, and then Waze kept telling them to go on all of our back roads. And if there was an outer connector, I like this red line where, you know, at least it crosses down into Spotsylvania so that it's not cutting off our specific locality from something else. So I personally, I mean, I don't think we're the ones to get into all the weeds and the details on this stuff, but to not have an option, I don't care who it takes or what it takes, we have to be able to provide our residents, even if it's a toll, something, and that can maybe, I know that the hot lanes really mitigate the amount of people who get on it because it is a toll road, but our residents need another option to be able to get around our county because it's really sad. To Meg's point, I have family come into my house every summer, and we want to go to dinner in Spotsylvania. The first thing we do is check the traffic, and we're like, well, can't do that, can't go to the city. You lose way more money because of this traffic than you think you do, because I can tell you we would go to Fredericksburg City every weekend and eat downtown, and because of the traffic, when we look if it's longer than 30 minutes, we're like, it's not worth it. There's no way I'm going to go sit in that traffic and go to downtown Fredericksburg. So, in my opinion, I will look at anything and everything until there is a solution.
Okay, thank you. Yes, please, Ms. Gary.
What I'm hearing is that, I guess the point of sentiment that you can empathize with is that crossing, if there was another crossing. So maybe I would suggest that if we could have people from Fredericksburg and look at this and say, where would that ideally be located if we were to do that? And maybe that's our starting point, at least to have a conversation and then build out something bigger. So I think there is a way forward on this. At least let's start with something we can agree with, that maybe we need another crossing.
I didn't say I was advocating for the crossing.
No, I didn't say advocating. It's emphasizing
I have some
a point of
sympathy for
understanding.
options, because without options, it never works. I would put a bus on that,
Well,
for example.
right, I mean.
So maybe that's just a place where we can start.
So and what I'm saying is that, you know, from the city's perspective, you know, not speaking for every single person from the city, but it is about choices. And if we're only considering options that still require every individual to get into their own automobile, we're not giving people choices. We're doing the same old.
I'll tell you, that's not CTEC's position. You know, we're looking at things like light rail or just more buses, but they're only profitable along certain routes because of population density.
All right, hold on.
So,
sorry. Okay, all right. I appreciate that. I personally, and we can have this discussion all night, the idea of transit having to be profitable is the biggest misnomer in transportation today. Roads do not pay for themselves. No one has ever asked a bridge to pay for itself. To ask transit to pay for itself is putting a burden on a mode of transportation that no other mode of transportation is expected to put on. So I'm not gonna listen to profitable or unprofitable. It is a service just like roads are. Mr. Ross.
I was just gonna say, I'm from rural Iowa, town of 1,000 people, and I'm sorry, but it's not about profit, it's about choices, and they're not going to be able to put a bus there because it's not feasible. People just won't ride it. We talked about using the Fred bus tonight because it's free, and that adds to it. But I mean, I don't think that's a reasonable thing to make transportation free because somebody is paying for it in the end. That it's about ridership, right? You're not going to get the ridership in a rural area that you need to justify the expense, whether it pays for itself or not. I don't think is the issue. It's a matter about why build a bus in a small town Iowa if nobody's going to ride it?
But I'm not asking to build the bus in the super rural areas. What I'm asking is,
our rural area, this area
yes,
you're looking at,
this is rural. That's rural for now. But the point is that if you give enough people choices, you'll still take it doesn't matter, maybe the people from the rural
It does sound like you want to take the choice away of driving.
No, I want to give people who live,
Yeah.
maybe folks who live closer in, if you give them options that are more feasible, then those cars are now off the road.
I would love.
And driving from Stafford
Do I
through
have
the
to
city.
drive my car to some bus to get to Wegmans now?
No, I'm not saying that every single person is necessarily going to have that option, but if you give the options, as Ian mentioned, to more people, then more people may end up taking that option, which takes their cars off the road.
It makes sense that you live in a city, because I can tell you in our county that is not a realistic conversation. When you own 10 to 15 acres, there's no way that there's public transit that available. We are still a rural community. And so we still need to get there. And we're not trying to build apartments, well, at least I'm hopefully not. But that is not a message that we can take back to our constituents. They live in Stafford because they want to live in a $500,000 4-bedroom house, and they want to be able to drive where they want to go, and they want to be able to get around. And that's why we're advocating for our residents to be able to cross the river and not be trapped on 95.
And I hear that, and I think that speaking regionally, to give your constituents what they want, we need to take a look at options for other parts of the region as well. And it could actually end up helping people in Stafford.
So you're holding us hostage until we give you free bus rides? Is that what I'm hearing?
Is it mutually beneficial?
So you're holding Stafford County residents hostage because you want free bus rides? That's ridiculous.
No, I'm asking about what is the most cost-effective way.
The community.
I'm asking about what is the most cost-effective way to reduce congestion. That's what I'm looking at. Mr. Schneider.
Mr.
Schneider.
So here's the reality, we can't solve this.
No.
But I just wanted to frame something. New Jersey has something called the Turnpike. Pennsylvania has something called the Turnpike. New York has something called the Thruway. Why? Because I believe the technical term, and I don't like to cuss too often in public meetings, but I believe it's called a shit show. And that's the dilemma. Now, again, I'm land use, transportation, all those things. You have Quantico, the town, but the base. You have places where they launch weapons. On the other side, you have a river. You are geographically constrained. You have huge issues that absolutely prevent doing things like that most states would do to solve something like this. It's big picture. I think we could do all the mega projects, and it would be a nightmare to get around all of that. However, there are things that can be done at the local level, and I think that's some of Ms. Vanucci is absolutely correct. You can't ask someone who's built that home to say, okay, I'm now going to just never leave it, or they want to drive somewhere. Agreed. If you build that new road, that new lane, all you're doing is you're moving the traffic that's currently sitting at, bear with me, Cosner's Corner, just gets to you 10 minutes faster. And then the traffic that's at Thornburg gets there 10 minutes faster. You have a huge problem that is traffic that doesn't actually live anywhere in this area passing through. It's the New Jersey place, it's the Pennsylvania place. So that's where I think you're gonna have to think a little bit differently about this and how we resolve it. Meanwhile, what are the things we can do to help, that we can come up with, to come up with solutions for throughput? And that's what you need more than anything else, throughput.
Well, we need throughput, but we also, our residents should not have to get on the interstate to get to Spotsylvania.
Well, the solution is a combination of things. There's not one silver bullet that's going to fix this.
Agreed.
And we're in the East-West study looking at the East-West problem. We don't have all the solutions there either. But for example, one of the things that I'm trying to do, and some of you are probably going to shoot me down when we present the results.
Where's your district?
Is that we are.
My district.
Okay, so you're south.
We're proposing a rapid bus, not a regular bus, but a rapid bus.
Thank you.
From Spotsylvania down Route 3 through connecting Spotsy Town Center through Central Park, through the most dense apartments and townhomes on down to the university, because the university students need to get to the cinemas, need to get to the shops, need to get to whatever, down to central Fredericksburg and to the train station and back, right? But at the end of the day, the consultant is working on this and will present the most feasible route. It's just one route for one rapid bus. When we bring that here, it's going to feed into this conversation because I'm also working on 13 roads, right? 13 roadways that we may widen or change intersections or whatever. We're working on cycle paths. But this bus is going to be controversial for some of you, and I don't know how you're going to vote because we'll see what happens in time. And I don't have a vote, so I just present proposals and then you will decide if you like them. But we'll see how you vote on that because that is something which is going to put lots of people in one bus. And because it's fast, quicker than a regular bus, more people will be inclined to take it because they don't have to wait an hour for a bus. There'll be a bus every 20 minutes, if it works. But you're all going to have to make the decision as to whether that is a feasible project that you're prepared to support, because I've then got to go get some money to fund it. And VDOT's going to look at me in strange ways when I come tell them, hey, I need bigger bus shelters, I need a lane here put for a bus, et cetera, and it's a combined project, right? But at the same time, we're looking at widening roads, changing intersections, dealing with the east-west movements. Now, I'm not doing a river crossing because I don't have a mandate from you all yet to go and design a river crossing. Hank's committee is trying to push you to do something like that. And if you want that, I'll happily get a consultant and start working on it, and you'll have to approve the funding for me to do that. I'll happily do that as well. We do have to build options for people. Bus, train, car, bicycle, it's the options. Now, no bicycles don't solve congestion, right? I'm not stupid.
I'd love to ride my bicycle down the street, but I won't.
No one's thinking of doing that.
I'm not so stupid that I think bicycles are going to solve congestion. But they do take it.
They're not even an option.
They do, exactly. So that's why I'm trying to, I think.
But you can ride your bike faster than you can sit on the interstate.
I think VDOT wants to murder me because I'm thinking of, Paul and I have this dream to put a tunnel under the I-95 so you can walk and bike under the I-95.
I like that idea.
No,
VDOT wants to murder me. But anyway, I promise you I will bring you options. I'm going to bring you 20 options out of the East-West study, and I'm going to bring you a bunch of options on the VCR Trail study, and Hank is going to bring you a bunch of options.
Good.
I need you all to take it further. I don't get a vote, and nor does Hank.
All right, yes, Ms. Hayes.
Just one thing here. So I think that what we do, I feel like kind of us from Stafford and maybe Spotsy feel the same way. Has there been a study done or a survey done of residents on what their ideas are? Would they take mass transit? Would they take, because honestly, I don't see it. I don't see a bus thing.
You've got to.
I believe actually there were surveys recently.
That would be great if that was available.
It says on the website.
Okay, all right. But I will tell you where I am, and I'm fairly close to the city, so I could see maybe there. But out Route 3 where it is, pretty country, it's not going to happen because people want to drive their cars.
You're quite correct. Mm-hmm. We mapped it. So there's a map from the 2021 FAMPO Transportation Improvement Survey. We got 1,060 people. And we mapped areas where they would like transit and areas where they do not. And it's quite clear that the rural parts of Pennsylvania, they don't want transit. And we wouldn't try, I don't think Jamie would ever try to put a bus there because it's just a waste of money.
Right.
But we know where those areas are where they would take it. And it largely is around density. Where people live close together, they generally will take transit. Where they don't want it. So we obviously, horses for courses, you only put where it works, you don't put it where it doesn't.
Well, and I also think that this is age-driven, to be honest with you. I think that probably a younger generation is more palpable to take mass transit because maybe they've lived in cities that have had it before. Me, I'm too old. I do the VRE or I'll do that stuff, but generally it's not on my time,
It's also
right?
got to work, right?
It's gotta work, absolutely.
And I
Absolutely.
100% agree.
Yeah.
If you have to sit 35 minutes to wait for the next bus, you're not gonna do it. Nobody
Right,
wants to do it.
right.
Yes.
So the 1,000 people that were in the survey, where, does it say where they're from?
Yeah.
Where they took the survey? Okay.
Yeah.
I'd be curious to see how many, I'll look online, thank you.
I did a 20-page presentation.
I can send you the link.
Okay.
All day online.
I think that's probably a good place to stop for tonight, so I'm gonna go ahead and adjourn the meeting.